Hello and welcome back, and if you're thinking of moving away from the cloud or upgrading your existing turnkey or DIY NAS solution towards either the UGREEN DXP4800 Pro or the Synology DS925 Plus, this is a video for you. I mean, let's face it, I compare NAS all the time. It's the name on the door. But I do think these two represent a very interesting proposition in terms of what you actually get for your money. We've compared these two brands before. We've compared multiple solutions from UGREEN and Synology before. But this one's going to be a wee bit different because, for a start, UGREEN's solution here is the more expensive of the two. The DXP4800 Pro arrives at give or take around $650 to $699 based on promos and other stuff that you can get. Whereas the Synology proposition here, the DS925 Plus, which at this point is around 8 to 9 months old in the market, you can pick it up for $599 to about $649. So you've already got a bit of a saving there, which, let's face it, might go towards upgrading your memory, might go towards a little extra terabyte here or there. But what about what you're getting for your money? What about the hardware profile? They're both 4-bay NAS solutions with a couple of M.2 bays inside. But really, there's so much more difference between these two devices. And unfortunately, if we're going to start with the weaker of the two, it's most certainly going to be the Synology. Bear in mind, efficiency plays its part. But this system arrives, the CPU is a quad-core, so 4-core, 4-thread AMD processor, the V1500, an AMD embedded Ryzen server processor CPU. Alongside that, it arrives with 4 gig of DDR4 memory, but it's ECC memory there. So one, you have to bear in mind that you do have to use Synology's own memory inside this system. You can't use third parties, or you can, but then it will show up as unverified and all kinds of nonsense along the way. But the fact still remains, ECC memory is going to be hugely appealing for those that really take their storage exceptionally seriously. Alongside that, those M.2 bays there on the base can be utilised for both storage pools and SSD caching in terms of read and write caching. But the M.2 bays there on the base, these are Gen 3 M.2 NVMe bays, and you have to use their M.2s. You can't use third-party M.2s for caching. You can't use third-party M.2s for storage pools. A limitation I think will and has annoyed a lot of people. And in terms of rear connectivity, this system arrives with two 2.5 gig network ports there and a USB type 3.2 Gen 1 port, so a 5 gigabit connection. And there is a USB type C port there to expand with a 5-bay expansion known as a DX525. So that's really the full hardware proposition there from Synology. The hardware proposition in terms of hardware value, at the very least, from UGREEN is a completely different kettle of fish. It arrives with an Intel i3 processor, which is a 6-core, 8-thread processor, the 1315U CPU in there. It is a higher TDP, and we'll go into power consumption later, but that CPU has more lanes, a higher architecture to play with, and it is spread about a lot on this system. Alongside the 4 main bays, as mentioned, it has the 2 M.2 bays on the base. Alongside those M.2s is their own memory options. This arrives with 2 SODIMM slots there for DDR5 non-ECC memory there, but it can be upgraded up to an eye-watering 64 gig or 96 technically from the CPU there. So again, quite a lot to like there, but again, remember, not ECC memory, which I know will be a deal breaker for some. But the M.2 bays in there, not only are they higher architecture, a Gen 4x4, but alongside that, you can use pretty much any SSD brand you like and take advantage of SSD caching as well as SSD storage pools. Also, the operating system runs on a third M.2 that runs on a Gen 3x4 speed lane that's included with the system, 128 gig, and you can install your own third-party operating system without it invalidating the hardware warranty. Synology, on the other hand, prioritise their own operating system, DSM, hugely, which is a good platform, by the way, but we'll get back to that later on. Now, that means that this gives us a greater flexibility of storage and a greater numeracy of storage as well. They both support large-scale hard drives, and I'm pleased to say that Synology has U-turned that awful policy of only supporting their own hard drives in their systems, and now you can take advantage of any hard drives you want right now on this. It's just SSDs where the limitations still apply. And remember, that freedom from restrictions only applies to the Plus series currently and previous generation devices. If you try and go into the Rackstation series, the other larger, bigger series, you still have that restriction, but this video is about these specific systems. This arrives with a 2.5 gig network port and a 10 gig network port there. This doesn't even have the option to upgrade to 10 GBE like its predecessor, the DS923 Plus. Alongside that, we've got 10 gig USB ports. We've also got USB Type C and A, and we have got there an SD card slot as well, something that Synology has retired on a number of their units ever since the, I think, 2014, 2016 there. So there's a lot of hardware to love here and a lot of flexibility for that hardware. So yes, it's costing more, but I think no one would argue that in terms of hardware, you're getting way more bang for your buck. But how does all that hardware translate into day-to-day operations? We will talk about software later on, but at least in terms of performance, at least in terms of temps, at least in terms of noise and power consumption, I would argue that the Synology runs at a lower temp. The Synology consumes less power, both in idle and in active utilization. It runs quieter, and a big part of that is plastic versus metal. And overall, just in terms of the ambient noise when it is in operation as well, alongside the power consumption and the thermals of both systems when they were in both 1 hour and 24-hour ops, the Synology is a lesser impact device in your operational environment, something that a number of you in close proximity really need to bear in mind. I will also highlight that both of these systems, because they support any hard drive you choose to use, it's worth adding that the larger the hard drive you go for, the more enterprise grade hard drive you go for, the more noise and ambient vibration they will generate, which is then multiplied and amplified by the core systems. So the bigger drives you're going to go for, keep in mind that the numbers I'm showing you on screen, particularly power consumption and noise, will scale up accordingly for both of these systems, ultimately resulting in the bigger setups resulting in a larger disparity between these two for the noise, the temps and the power consumption. Also, it's worth highlighting that depending on your use case scenario, the hardware architecture I've described will be very different in terms of your deployment. For example, the Intel i3 inside the UGREEN there has got integrated graphics on board. So if you're going to be taking advantage of things like Jellyfin, if you're going to be taking advantage of more graphical operations, this is going to do a better job because it has a more specialized component on board to get that job done. The Intel the AMD V1500 embedded Ryzen inside the Synology is built around efficiency, but not graphical capability. There is no integrated graphics on there. It's not using like AMD Vega or anything like that. The result is that graphical manipulation or any kind of multimedia playback on this, you're going to have a harder time. It's going to use more power to get the job done, and there's going to be more CPU utilization overall, and obviously the Lecky build to think of as well. But crucially, Synology has rolled back a lot of their support of things like HEVC on a number of their apps and services, and there isn't even the ability to insert them on there, relying significantly more on edge hardware to have certain licenses. And hopefully, or they hope, that a lot of the devices that are using this as a storage access have the capability and the permissions to do a lot of that hard lifting when it comes to integrated graphics assisted file manipulation. But in terms of file processing, on paper, because this has got 10 gig and it's got Gen 4 architecture, the performance is going to be way higher. And I would argue in like-for-like scenarios it probably would be, but these are different operating systems. They have different levels of efficiency and eking out from those processors. And arguably, in a 2.5 gig situation, and in terms of internal processing, the Synology does a better job. They've done a lot more optimization on their system over time. And we'll get onto software in a bit. It has to be said that performance-wise, in this capped scenario, and just generally in terms of efficiency, the Synology is better, but this has a better peak potential performance. It might not be as efficient, but it can hit those highs way more. Case in point, even if you use one of their own M.2s inside this for storage pool, you will only get around a gigabyte per second internally. This can hit 5 to 6 gigabytes of internal performance there. And of course, once you spread that out with 10 gig on the rear, it results in much better peak. But the efficiency is still very much in the corner of the Synology. Which brings us inevitably to the software, because although arguably UGREEN have done a banger job in the last 18 to 24 months evolving their UGOS NAS operating system, and again, they've been knocking on NAS for since I think 2020, 2021 in their own Chinese regions. It has to be said that the Western version of UGOS and the NAS operating system as a whole is still nowhere near as developed and feature-rich as that of Synology's DSM platform. It isn't just responsiveness, it isn't just apps and services and availability and support on different client software and hardware. It's simply that Synology have got things in there near 30 years, I believe, or 25 to 30 years of development that are just unrivaled in the NAS space. Surveillance station, the virtual machine management. Yes, there's a VM tool on UGREEN's platform, but it's nowhere near as evolved and capable and supporting things like high availability and more as you find. And mounting cloud VMs on bare metal, you just can't do that on UGREEN right now, or at least as fluidly. Then you've got things like active backup for business built into DSM-7 that is just industry leading. Their backup and sync applications there, their Office suite. They're dabbling, whether you like it or not, with AI, with the AI console integration into the collaboration suite of Office, chat, and more. Synology have rolled out a number of applications that replace third-party clients, allowing you to have a unified ecosystem around your storage and your client devices. UGREEN doesn't have that yet. It doesn't have a native client tool that streams files and pins files intelligently that Synology does. It doesn't have the same surveillance tool. They're working on it. They're rolling out a surveillance tool and their own cameras as we speak. They are developing different tools and bells and whistles within the UGREEN ecosystem, but they are still working from a huge chronological disadvantage when Synology have done so much work on their eco, and you can feel it. But remember, the UGREEN system can roll out a third-party OS, so if you don't want to use theirs, you can go ahead and install TrueNAS. You can go ahead and install Unraid and take advantage of those more mature DIY platforms, and that flexibility matters. Ultimately, between these two in terms of software, I think no one can argue with me that as in terms of a combined hardware-software package, the Synology provides a better option. But it's not going to be for everyone, and if you're not going to take advantage of those bells and whistles, and arguably some of the software has its limitations in what you can and cannot do, the UGREEN side of things does provide its own attractive proposition in terms of software. A year and a half ago, when I compared these two brands, I compared it as a hardware versus software proposition because UGREEN's platform was still very much, well, green. But things have changed and escalated substantially over that period. And now, although UGREEN still doesn't touch Synology in terms of software at the same level, they are slowly closing the gap. And no one a year and a half ago would have thought that these guys might be challenging QNAP for second place in the turnkey NAS market. But I think they really are closing. And right now, if Synology aren't paying enough attention, more fool them, because although these guys here right now are making most of their moves into the home, the prosumer, the home lab, and here on the early SMB space, they are throwing what feels like the money cheat at the wall here to get their brand out there, rolling out cameras, rolling out integrated native UPSs, rolling out different solutions, and I don't think it's that long before they start looking at rack mount solutions. They're not at Synology's level, and it will take years, but if you don't care about that and you are just looking for a repository of your data and you're not looking at enterprise and higher the way Synology feel like they're doing, UGREEN is going to be an attractive proposition for you, and the Pro here is a great NAS for that. But just keep in mind, Synology has DSM. Synology has efficiency on their side. They have a long history. They have a lot more of the support network that UGREEN lacks right now. And as a mature option, we can't argue with the fact that even the DS925 Plus, which leverages more software than hardware, is still a great solution in 2026. And if those things matter to you, maybe look at that side of the table. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this. Again, we've compared these two brands and more here on the channel, and I'll link to a bunch below, but I'm sure YouTube is recommending it as I speak. On top of that, if you want to get hold of either one of these solutions or any of the stuff that I talked about today, so if you want to get hold of them, if you want to support what we do, and the stores linked in the description are the ones that you were going to use anyway, please use those links in order to do so. Using those links results in a small commission coming here to NAS Compares, which allows me and Eddie to keep doing what we do. It's just us doing the videos, the guides, the reviews, the support, the forum and more. But more importantly, it allows you to support creators like me and others without it costing you a single penny more. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.